Every single year, millions of people walk into job interviews feeling underprepared, nervous, and unsure of what the person sitting across from them is actually looking for. They rehearse answers, iron their shirts, and show up on time, yet still walk out without the job. The reason is almost never their qualifications. It's because they didn't understand what was really being asked. Today, that changes. This isn't just another list of interview questions with cookie cutter answers. We're going deeper than that. For each question, you're going to learn what the interviewer is genuinely thinking, what kind of answer they're hoping to hear. And just as importantly, the mistakes that most candidates make without even realizing it. Let's start with the question that opens almost every single interview in the world. Tell me something about yourself, or sometimes phrased as walk me through your CV. It sounds simple. Casual, even, but here's what most people get wrong. They think the interviewer is asking because they actually want to know about you as a person. They don't, at least not in the way you might expect. What the interviewer is truly evaluating at this moment is your confidence, your enthusiasm, and the energy you bring when you speak about yourself. This is your very first impression, and it sets the tone for everything that follows. It's your opening performance, and the stage is all yours. The mistake that comes up again and again is when candidates treat this question like a casual conversation at a party. Responses like "I love watching movies" or "I enjoy going out with friends on weekends" are far too informal and completely miss the point. The interviewer isn't your new neighbor, they're a professional deciding whether you belong in their organization. So the answer needs to reflect that same level of professionalism. What you should do instead is build a short, confident narrative that covers three things: your educational background, any relevant work experience you've gathered, and a personal interest or two that shows you're a well-rounded individual. For example, you might say something like, "I grew up in France and studied accounting. I also had the opportunity to work with an accounting firm for about 8 months, which gave me a strong practical foundation. I genuinely enjoy working with numbers. There's something satisfying about solving them. Outside of work, I like to read and go jogging whenever the weather cooperates." Notice what that answer does. It's professional, it's personal without being inappropriate, and it flows naturally. It tells a story in under a minute while hitting all the right notes. The reason this question is so important is that it gives you full control at the very start. There are no trick elements, no hidden traps. It's an open invitation to present yourself in the best possible light. Take it seriously, prepare it in advance, and deliver it with genuine confidence, because the impression you make in these first 30 seconds can shape how the interviewer perceives everything else you say afterward. Once the ice has been broken with that opening question, the interview typically moves into territory that feels a little more evaluative. The second question that comes up in almost every interview is, what are your strengths? And while it might seem like a straightforward question, it's one that candidates consistently handle poorly, not because they don't have strengths, but because they don't know how to articulate them in a way that lands well in a professional setting. What the interviewer is looking for here is a sense of how positively and clearly you think about yourself. They want to see self-awareness paired with confidence. It's a broad question by design, and there's genuinely no single correct answer. However, there are certainly wrong approaches, and the most common one is giving a one-liner that sounds vague and rehearsed. Saying something like, "I'm a very friendly person and people love being around me" might be true, but it tells the interviewer almost nothing of value. It sounds more like a yearbook quote than a professional self-assessment. The far better approach is to describe a strength in a way that's specific, believable, and tied to how you actually work. A strong answer might sound like, "My strongest trait is attention to detail. I genuinely believe in thorough planning before execution. Even back in college, I would organize my entire week in advance to make sure nothing slipped through the cracks. I've also been told by colleagues and classmates that I'm quite approachable, which I think comes from being naturally outgoing. So between my structured approach to work and my ability to connect with people around me, I'd say those are my core strengths." That kind of answer paints a picture. It's grounded in real behavior, not just personality labels, and it gives the interviewer something concrete to remember you by. This question is also an early opportunity to subtly plant seeds about the kind of employee you'd be. Think about the role you're applying for and tailor your strengths accordingly. If it's a detail-oriented role, emphasize precision. If it's a leadership position, highlight your ability to organize and communicate. The goal isn't to fabricate anything, it's to highlight the genuine strengths that are most relevant to the job in front of you. Right after your strengths, the conversation almost always takes a deliberate turn. The interviewer leans in slightly and asks, "So, what would you say are your weaknesses?" This question makes a lot of people visibly uncomfortable. And that reaction itself is something the interviewer notices. The discomfort usually comes from a misunderstanding of what this question is actually designed to uncover. Many candidates, in an attempt to be honest, end up saying things like, "I have a really short temper," or "I'm an impatient person," while honesty is generally admirable. There's a difference between being honest and being strategically unwise. Sharing a weakness that raises genuine red flags about your character or your ability to work with others is not the kind of transparency that wins interviews. The interviewer is not asking you to confess your flaws, they're asking you to demonstrate self awareness and the ability to manage your own shortcomings. What the best answer to this question accomplishes is a careful balance. It acknowledges a real limitation while simultaneously framing it in a way that reveals a positive underlying quality. One of the most effective approaches is what's sometimes called the perfectionist reframe. You might say, "I think one of my weaknesses is that I tend to be overly detail oriented. I want everything I produce to be as close to perfect as possible, and sometimes that means I spend more time on a task than originally planned, which can push deadlines. It's something I'm actively working on, learning to balance thoroughness with efficiency." Read that carefully because something clever is happening. The weakness being described, being too meticulous, is essentially the flip side of the strength discussed in the previous answer. You're reinforcing your identity as someone who cares deeply about quality, while also showing the maturity to recognize where that quality can become a challenge. That's the structure to aim for: a real weakness, a positive root cause, and evidence that you're aware of it and working to improve. It shows emotional intelligence, professional maturity, and the kind of self reflection that strong candidates consistently demonstrate. With the strengths and weaknesses conversation behind you, the interview moves toward the future. The next question is one that trips up a surprising number of candidates, including experienced professionals. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Sometimes framed as, "What are your short term and long term goals?" It sounds like a chance to dream out loud. But the purpose behind it is far more practical than it appears. What the interviewer is really trying to gauge is your level of commitment. In an era where employee turnover is one of the biggest costs a company faces, hiring managers are deeply invested in understanding how long a candidate is likely to stay. They want to know if you're serious about building something at this organization, or whether you're just passing through on your way to something else. That's the real question hiding inside this one. The mistake most candidates make is going to one of two extremes. Either they give an answer that sounds wildly unrealistic: "I'd like to be the CEO of this company," or "I plan to launch my own airline," which signals poor self-awareness. Or they admit they genuinely have no idea, which signals a lack of direction. Neither of those leaves the interviewer feeling confident about making an offer. The answer that works is one that shows a clear, grounded, and achievable trajectory, one that keeps you within the company's ecosystem. Something like, "5 years from now, I'd like to be in a management position. Between now and then, my focus would be on absorbing as much practical experience as possible, contributing meaningfully to the team, and eventually growing into a role where I can both lead and mentor others. I'm genuinely excited about learning from the people I'd be working with here. And I see a lot of opportunity to grow in this direction within your organization." That answer tells the interviewer exactly what they need to hear. You're here to grow. You're realistic about the journey, and you see your future within this company, not outside of it. As the interview progresses, the questions begin to shift from the personal to the situational. One question that consistently separates prepared candidates from unprepared ones is, "What do you know about our company?" It might seem like a simple knowledge check, but its implications run much deeper. When an interviewer asks this, they already know the answer: they work there. What they're actually measuring is how seriously you've taken this opportunity. Walking into an interview without researching the company is one of the most common and most avoidable mistakes candidates make. It sends a quiet but powerful message that you're treating this as just another application in a long list rather than a specific opportunity you genuinely want. Interviewers notice this immediately, and it's very difficult to recover from once that impression is formed. The preparation required for this question isn't complicated, it just requires effort. Before any interview, spend time on the company's website, read recent news articles about them, look at their social media, and understand what they do, who they serve, and what they stand for. Know their products or services, their history, any recent milestones or awards, and ideally, something about their culture or values. Then, when the question comes, you can answer with specificity and genuine enthusiasm. For example, I know that your company has built a strong reputation for exceptional customer service, and you were actually recognized with an award for Best Service Provider in the country, which is a significant achievement. Your client base is impressive, and from what I've read, the culture here places a strong emphasis on team development and innovation. An answer like that demonstrates initiative, intellectual engagement, and genuine interest, three qualities every hiring manager wants to see. It tells them you did your homework not because you had to, but because you cared enough to. Right after that, many interviewers will raise a question that probes your adaptability. How well do you handle change? This is particularly relevant today when industries are shifting rapidly. Teams are evolving and companies are constantly revising their strategies. The interviewer wants to know whether you're someone who digs in their heels when things shift, or whether you can adjust, recalibrate, and keep moving forward. The wrong answer here is a flat, unsubstantiated claim like, oh, I handle change very well. That tells the interviewer nothing. Anyone can say that. What creates genuine credibility is a real example, a specific situation from your past where change was forced upon you and you navigated it successfully. You might say, in a previous role, our team's direct supervisor resigned unexpectedly, and a new manager came on board with a completely different approach to how our project was being run. The strategy shifted significantly, and there was a lot of uncertainty within the team. I focused on staying flexible, kept communication open with my colleagues, and we worked together to adapt to the new direction. In the end, the results were strong. That kind of answer doesn't just claim adaptability, it proves it. The interview is now in its final stretch, and the remaining questions tend to be the ones that reveal the most about who you are under pressure and how you think when things get difficult. One of those questions is, how well do you work under pressure? The reason this question exists is straightforward: modern workplaces are demanding. Deadlines pile up, resources run thin, and expectations often exceed what feels manageable. The interviewer needs to know that when that happens, you won't crumble. The answer that doesn't work is one that's overly casual or dismissive, like pressure doesn't affect me at all. That sounds unconvincing because pressure affects everyone. What the interviewer wants is evidence that you've faced pressure before and handled it with composure and competence. Walk them through a real moment. For example, there was a project in a previous role that our team was given 4 days to complete, a task that would normally take 10. There was genuine panic in the group and morale dropped quickly. I focused on helping the team slow down mentally even as the clock sped up. We sat together, prioritized the work, assigned responsibilities clearly, and committed to staying late when necessary. We submitted the project on time and the quality held up. That experience taught me that pressure is manageable when you have a plan and a team that trusts each other. That answer shows leadership calm under fire. And practical problem solving, three things any employer would value. The final question, and one of the most revealing, is, how do you handle important decisions? This one tends to come up when the role involves any level of leadership or independent judgment. The interviewer wants to understand your decision-making process, how you think, who you consult, and how you weigh consequences before committing to a course of action. The temptation here is to downplay your experience, especially if you're relatively early in your career. Saying, I haven't really had to make any major decisions, is an answer that closes the door before it even opens. Instead, speak to the process you would use, supported by any experience you do have. A strong answer might be, I approach important decisions by first drawing on whatever experience I have that's relevant: past outcomes, patterns I've observed, lessons I've carried forward. Then I take time to carefully weigh the potential advantages and disadvantages of each option. I also believe in consulting the people around me because good decisions rarely come from a single perspective. And before committing to anything, I think through the downstream consequences as thoroughly as I can. That combination of personal judgment, collaborative input, and forward thinking gives me confidence when the stakes are high. What makes this answer effective is that it doesn't pretend decision making is easy. It acknowledges the weight of it while presenting a clear, mature framework for how you approach it. That's exactly the kind of thinking a hiring manager wants in a candidate they're considering trusting with responsibility. Interviews are not just about whether you're qualified, they're about whether you're prepared. The candidates who succeed are the ones who understand that every question has a purpose, every answer is an opportunity, and every interaction in that room is a chance to show not just what you know, but who you are. Prepare with that mindset and you'll walk in with far more than confidence. You'll walk in with clarity. Claude Fable 5 is currently unavailable. Learn more opens in new tab.